it'll be fun to talk to him about all of that here in a little bit. RJ says, I really hope that he gets picked up in the NFL. I do there as well. And, I know that Fitzpatrick is a slightly different player than, say, like Charlie Warner was, but one of the things that comes to mind for me about Fitzpatrick is the Charlie Warner story where, Warner's been active roster in San Francisco, been a part of what's gone on there under Kyle Shanahan. And I think that may have caught some fans by surprise. Warner was not always a huge part of the Georgia offense. He was on the field a lot, but this is back in an era in which Georgia wasn't throwing to tight ends nearly as much as it is now. But I remember talking to like Scott Warner, the great former dog who's obviously the uncle to Charlie Warner. And, Scott was at an event we did a couple summers ago, and he was already pretty sure that Charlie was going to find a home in the NFL, regardless of where he got drafted, anything like that, because of the kinds of things that he did, the sort of workhorse elements that you have to have as part of the NFL. And Scott, who obviously knows the game, was pretty confident that Charlie would find a home in the NFL because of that. So it's interesting to note that the Warner family was not that surprised when Charlie went on to become an active member in the NFL. And, maybe it's a similar path here for John Fitzpatrick, who, given all the attention that so many Georgia players have gotten, there's just going to be less to go around for a guy like John. But it certainly seems like NFL teams are paying very close attention to his availability, because I know he's been doing a lot of interviews and he's been talking to a lot of teams. Obviously, he brings that size to the table. He's a very tall guy. He's a very physical player. He's really sure-handed. So finding a home in the NFL, I believe, is something that John has a very good chance to do, despite the fact that there are a lot of Georgia players who may get more pre-draft attention than he does. He could be a valuable commodity for some team. Scott Boland says the drive that resulted in the Bowers touchdown was my favorite part of the championship game. Just ran it down their throat. Yeah, it was a very satisfying thing to see, and that's actually one of the events we're going to do on our cruise. Is we're going to have kind of a special watch party and get together and do some trivia and rewatch the national championship game and basically just kind of have a celebratory moment there on that. And it's just cool to go back and relive some of those moments. And that sheer physicality, something that Georgia had that I don't think Alabama had enough of last year. It's part of the reason why the fourth quarter went the way that it did. And I know many of you enjoy yourself going back and rewatching all that and having a good time doing it. Keith Finney says, I wish I could go sail on the sea with you. Well, Keith, I wish you could be there as well. We are going to have a good time. Listen, I'm a fun guy to be on a cruise with. I'm not going to lie to you. Richard D's asking about John's health. He had been a little bit banged up. Yeah, we'll talk to him more about that here coming up in just a bit there too. So George Ann's been working on a TV show. That's actually really cool. We have such talented people in our audience. Always very impressive to see. Jesse S. says, when will you start working on your Billy Napier jokes? I miss you making fun of Dan Mullen. So we've done some Napier stuff lately. We've kind of leaned pretty heavily into the Sling Blade stuff with him. We even had a Sling Blade related golden shoe the other day from our buddy Mad Dog. So we'll certainly heat up the Napier talk here in just a matter of days, I'm sure. I think the interesting thing about Florida, let me, by the way, welcome in the rest of our audience. Live on video now, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Good morning to all of you. I think the interesting thing about Florida right now, though, is how much they're fighting for relevance, not just in comparison to Georgia. Obviously, there's a chasm right now between the reigning national champions and a program, the first-year coach, that had so many embarrassing losses a year ago. But Florida's fight for relevance comes even in comparison to like a South Carolina, a program that you would typically think of as slotted below the Gators. But right now, I don't think you can say that. Tennessee, much the same way. For a long time, over the course of the last 15, 20 years, Tennessee has found themselves looking up at Florida, but outlook for the upcoming season has that reversed here a bit. So, from a serious standpoint on Florida, as we've said this week already on our show, their issue down in Gainesville is not how do you close the gap with Georgia, it's how you close the gap with what is perceived to be an advantage for Tennessee and South Carolina there, which just speaks to, as I said before, the wide chasm between Georgia and Florida right now. Gators still Georgia's number one rival, but in the early days here of Billy Napier, literally zero threat whatsoever to anything happening here at UGA. But we will continue, of course, to enjoy making fun of Florida because we believe a good Georgia fan is a Gator hater first and foremost, no matter what the landscape here in the SEC East looks like. So, a lot to do today. It's John Fitzpatrick, the great former dog, really fun guy to talk to. We'll do that with him before the show is done. A lot of recruiting stuff with Jeff Sintel. Bunch of movement post G-Day. We'll see if we can cover all of that with Jeff. I'll give you kind of an update on how the shows next week are going to look and why we think they're going to be really fun for you. We'll do a lot of that and explain all that for you here today. And off the top, Georgia did something this week that I think is fun. And I think they ought to do more stuff kind of like this for a couple of pretty specific reasons. Let me start off the show by talking about that here right now. I'm really glad you're here on a Friday. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans presented by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
There is a pocket of sports fans that really like uniforms. I'm one of them. Not just my favorite team's uniforms like Georgia, the school we obviously talk about here on this program each and every day, but just sort of sports in general. I have strong opinions on uniforms. Some fans do. I'm kind of one of those. And yesterday, Georgia announced kind of a slight alteration to its uniform, bringing back the block numbers on the jerseys. I think that's a good thing, and we'll talk about that maybe a little bit. But beyond that, I kind of think the way that Georgia rolled all of this out was also a good thing, and I think it's the kind of thing that Georgia could stand to do a little more of. And let me see if I can explain why I think this is the case and why I think this is a good chance for UGA fans to engage here a little bit. Here's the one thing that we know about Kirby Smart. And I don't mean this in any way critical because I think most people kind of like this about Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart is very much a get down to business type of coach. He's pretty all business. Now, sometimes when you see like video that a recruit shares of a recruiting visit, you see a more relaxed version of Kirby, or sometimes when like say the SEC network has interviewed him alongside like one of his friends, like Will Muschamp or something like that. You know, Kirby in coaching circles seems to be a little bit more relaxed. Sometimes we see leaked video of him at a coaching clinic, and he's a little different there than he sometimes might be with, media, public, whatever else. That there is a way to sometimes capture a video image of Kirby that's pretty relaxed and kind of a guy that seems to enjoy obviously having a lot of fun. But the persona of him as the lead man for Georgia football in that role is one that's very business oriented, very much down to business, kind of an all business type mindset. I don't know that this is better embodied than a question that Kirby got from his press conference on Saturday after G-Day. One of the reporters was, I guess, going to do a story about what G-Day used to be like when you had celebrity coaches. I kind of vaguely remember some of this 80s and 90s a little bit when you'd have, whether it be media types or whatever else, like one guy coaching the red team, one guy coaching the black team. Admittedly, I wouldn't mind being a celebrity coach for G-Day. Not that I'm a celebrity, but just someone that would like to do that, admittedly. But the point is, Georgia doesn't really do that anymore. And Kirby Smart talked a little bit on Saturday why it is that they don't really do that at Georgia. And there are a couple of phrases that he used in the midst of talking about why Georgia doesn't want celebrity coaches for G-Day, or why Kirby doesn't, get into stuff like that just sound about as Kirby Smart as it could possibly get, like really embodying everything we sort of think we already know about Kirby. Let me let you hear Kirby on Saturday kind of rejecting the notion that Georgia might bring in a sideshow like celebrity coaches for spring game. This was Kirby from Saturday.
Well, it doesn't bother me. You can do whatever you want as far as the coaches. I want the players to play. So all that's for entertainment purposes. For me, it's about making the players go out there and play well. How did they handle the pregame? How did they handle the halftime? Because everybody thinks it doesn't matter. It does matter. Because the next time they do it, it's going to be in Atlanta against Oregon. So for me, it's a dress rehearsal. It's like see where their mind is. Does this kid respond well to anxiety? Because there's some anxiety out there today. So I'm a lot more into that than I am just goofing off with it.
It's the phrase that he uses at the end that kind of gets me here when he talks about, listen, I'm more into that than just goofing off with it. But when you hear him say, like, goofing off with it, like goofing off, the idea that we're not going to come here at spring game and just goof off. I mean, the level of disdain that just drips off of his voice when he talks about the counter, the alternative to how Georgia approaches its spring game, coming out here and goofing off with what's happening on the field, the level of disdain that he has for that idea is just about as Kirby Smart as it gets. Also, at the beginning of the clip, when he talks about, all that kind of stuff is for entertainment purposes, like the idea that football could ever be reduced to just mere entertainment, Smart kind of views it all differently than that. And listen, I'm not saying that's bad, nor do I believe that most of the people in our audience think that's bad. I think most of the people in our audience kind of like the idea that Kirby Smart is as hard driving and energetic as he is. In fact, it's almost in that clip you just heard from him a moment ago. He comes across as more intense after a spring game than some coaches come across after a real game. That he is as game ready, midseason form right there as some coaches might be in September, October, November. And that level of energy, that level of dedication and focus, that tenacity almost, probably helps explain some of why Georgia's had the success that it has had, because Kirby Smart is that business-oriented, that all business when it comes to that approach for UGA. Folks kind of like that. But here's the thing, is that when you have a coach that's like that, it does leave some elements of the program, maybe, I don't want to say this, that there are some things that could be done to cultivate interest among fans that might not quite get done. That if Kirby is so focused on being the best version of Georgia football that he can be, as Kirby says, the entertainment part of all this maybe gets lost, which I think puts an extra responsibility on the folks around Georgia football, the people that work for the program that are not Kirby Smart or his 10 assistant coaches, the people that work around the program, to kind of cultivate the entertainment part of all of this that Kirby himself is just going to ignore, because there are some head coaches around the sport who seem to kind of buy in more to the entertainment part of it. Like, think about, like, say, Mike Leach at Mississippi State. I would never want Kirby to be more like Leach, but that's a guy who seems to understand football as entertainment. I would say some of what Shane Beamer, very different type of way, but he seems to understand some of that at South Carolina. There are some coaches that do get the idea of, hey, there's a part of my job which is to cultivate the entertainment side of football and get folks kind of paying attention to my program. Georgia is not a program, even before Kirby Smart, that had to necessarily be sold that way. Georgia fans are already pretty bought in, but that level of buy-in from fans is not necessarily the industry standard across the country. Different programs have different responsibilities when it comes to cultivating their fan needs. And so Georgia has never quite needed to cultivate that entertainment part of this. But it's still kind of cool when they do. And so, from that standpoint, I thought that something that Georgia did this week was really nice. I told you before. They have brought back the block numbers on the uniforms. And the best that I can tell, like, I'm a little bit of a traditionalist when it comes to uniforms, so any kind of change that goes back in the direction of tradition, I'm going to kind of like. The best that I can tell, most fans kind of like this too, for whatever reason. The font that Georgia has been using recently is not my favorite, but this is kind of a step back in that more traditional direction. So it's kind of a cool thing that Georgia's doing this. But beyond that, I think there's kind of a cool way in which Georgia has rolled all of this out. First of all, if they wanted to make uniform changes, they could have just worn these on G-Day, right? It's like, hey, we're going to show off these new uniforms in G-Day. But whoever's kind of in charge of this kind of thing is smart enough to understand, no, you don't need to do this on G-Day because people are already excited about seeing the spring game. There's no reason to waste something like this, kind of a cool uniform change that will mostly be well received. There's no reason to waste that on G-Day because people are already excited about G-Day. Why not drop kind of a cryptic video social media message a couple of days after that and kind of get folks guessing, get folks talking? In fact, I think we showed this to you yesterday on the show, and I kind of joked about, I don't know if I'm just getting old or what, but when I saw the animated video of the 2022 year and the way it's flashing the numbers, and it is flashing to show some block numbers, I didn't necessarily know that this was a reveal that Georgia was going to go back to the block jersey numbers, but a lot of folks in the replies clearly did understand that's what the message was about. But it's kind of like a, I don't know, whether it be what, like is it Loki on Marvel or the old show Lost on ABC? There's a certain like sort of cryptic nature to all of this that I think fans kind of enjoyed. Had folks guessing, had folks talking, and then Georgia a day later comes back with another video. Once again, really well done to demonstrate that Georgia is, in fact, we'll show you some of this as we kind of talk here, that Georgia is going to have some block numbers. They bring back a David Pollock to be a part of all of this as a kind of a nice level of almost like a special effect type deal in all of this, and going back and showing you some old video and just kind of getting you excited to a kind of a throwback of what was a really cool age for Georgia football, as I said before, with the surprise reveal of David Pollock wearing the uniform there at the end. This is the kind of entertainment stuff that Kirby Smart, as you heard before, doesn't really buy into. Smart's not worried about, hey, fun social media videos, what the uniform looks like, or anything along those lines. He's worried about getting the players better. But just because that's where Smart's attention is focused doesn't mean that someone's attention shouldn't be focused on that kind of thing. And so I think the way in which Georgia rolled out these uniforms this week was actually, pretty fun because, let's face it, there is an element for Georgia football. We talked before about Kirby Smart being all business, and the impact of that ends up being there's an element of Georgia football that just sort of feels business as usual year after year after year, and that's not a bad thing. Georgia's going to start every year as among the shortlist favorites to win the SEC, be back in the college football playoff, and that's the kind of thing that Georgia fans don't have to spend very much time, wondering about, worrying about. They know their team is very well solidified when it comes to that. So Georgia fans don't have that same opportunity to wonder about their team in the offseason that other fans do. Georgia fans kind of know that UGA is going to be very good in almost every year and just how good does it end up being. So when you can cultivate some wonder among fans, it's probably a pretty good thing to do. So I'm going to give a shout out to UGA on this. I thought the throwback to the block letter uniforms, the numbers on the jerseys, probably a pretty good step. But taking the extra creative step to announce it in kind of a fun way with a couple of days worth of videos and get fans guessing, get fans talking, bring back a UGA grade to help you with a little bit of a surprise reveal. That's the kind of entertainment stuff that Kirby doesn't always buy into, but still probably pretty important for the program, and it seems like Georgia fans had a good time with that this week. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented by Kroger, and glad to have you with us no matter how you do. 9:45, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com, DawgNation app. 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We're on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and we're available as a podcast, however you find them. The Apple Player, Spotify, Google, all the various podcast platforms. You can use all of them to find our show each and every day, and we're very happy to have you doing all of that. Also, big thanks to our friends at Kroger for making it all possible. If you're watching on video today, you see a brand new, good-looking brand new logo there from Kroger, which is really fun to see, and we're excited about all of that. But here's the thing we're also really excited about when it comes to our friends Kroger right now. The fact that they're helping you save money at the pumps right now. And listen, we all know this. Most of us are just trying to get by each and every day, trying to make, hay in the world, knowing that things are more expensive than they've ever been, and it seems like those fuel costs are as expensive as anything right now. And that brings about a little stress, right? You're trying to figure out how to pay for all this kind of stuff. Well, Kroger's going to try to help you out on that because they're going to give you those fuel rewards when you do what you're already doing, which is shopping and saving big inside Kroger stores. So let me explain to you how this works. You can earn a fuel point for every $1 you spend in a Kroger store or online at Kroger.com. Now, there's also opportunities as well to earn twice the fuel points there, too, when you purchase gift cards and also some special weekends throughout the year. And when you sign up for the Kroger Boost, there's a lot of different ways to get double fuel points. But those extra fuel point savings at Kroger is a great way to save money at the pumps with Kroger right now. So stop in store and find out more about this, or do your shopping there at Kroger.com, and you can learn all about that today. By the way, we'll also remind you once again before our show is done today about our friends at Kroger when it comes to the great championship mom celebration that's ongoing, and your chance to be a big winner, or the mom in your life to be a big winner, courtesy of our friends at Kroger. We'll tell you more about that coming up on our show here today. Also, special guest before we're done today there as well. And this is going to be really fun. We're going to bring on a member of the national champion Georgia Bulldogs on today's show. On his way to the NFL, working hard to get ready for that. We'll talk to John Fitzpatrick today. There's a lot to get into with John on our program today, both in terms of what his pre-draft process has been like. I think that's a really interesting window into, this time of year for these NFL hopefuls. John can tell us about that. He can also tell us about how much fun it was to put on that national championship ring on Saturday and the special celebration that was there for those Georgia players. That's great to see. And, of course, the Georgia tight end position, incredibly deep right now, as deep as maybe it's ever been anywhere. John can give us some thoughts on some of those guys here coming up in just a little bit. That's going to be really fun with John Fitzpatrick before we're done on the program today. Of course, Jeff Sintel, a lot of recruiting news to get into with Jeff. It's really amazing how much movement there has been with top prospects post G-Day. So Jeff will help us explain all of that here coming up in just a little bit. Can't wait for that. Let me also give you a little bit of a heads up here, too. Today is a bit of a getaway day for us. And I'll go around the doghouse and just kind of explain this to you here for a moment. Today is a little bit of a getaway day for us. This is the last show we're doing in studio until next Monday. I mean, a Monday, more than a week from now. Because starting on Monday, we are on board Independence of the Seas with Royal Caribbean, and those of you who are cruising with DawgNation here next week, the time of the DawgNation cruise has finally arrived. We're really excited about all of that. But it's not just a vacation for us because we still want to deliver DawgNation daily to you. So here's how it's going to work. If you normally watch on video, the show will still be there for you. Not a 1st and 15 next week. The show's going to start at 10 a.m., which is kind of our normal start time anyway. But no 1st and 15 next week. Show starts across all platforms at 10 a.m. These will be pre-recorded shows, but not pre-recorded like a week in advance. Like we're going to record these on the ship. We just don't have the kind of Wi-Fi capabilities to necessarily do the show streaming live. So we're going to kind of do these sort of the night before. So if you if you tune in, I won't be interacting with your comments live. I'm actually going to try to interact with some commenters there on board the cruise ship with us, and that's going to be really fun. But your live comments, you of course can interact with each other. I just won't be able to interact with you on video next week. But like we're going to record, we'll do Monday show live. We are going to do that. So from that standpoint, I'm going to do that from Florida before I leave. So that'll be pretty normal, pretty typical. We'll have plenty of interaction there on that. But Tuesday morning show, we're going to record Monday night, and then kind of the same thing for the rest of the week there too. We'll be live again back on Friday, post NFL draft, kind of react to some of that with you. So show's going to be a little bit different next week on the basis of the fact that we're on the ship, but we're going to still deliver a DawgNation daily to you. In fact, we're going to have a good bit more of Mike Griffith, a good bit more of Jeff Santel on the show, just kind of having fun and kind of sharing some of the sights and sounds with all of that. So I think it should be a really great experience. I know it's going to be fun for those who are on board with us, and I know Mike and Jeff are really excited about being on Independence of the Seas with Royal Caribbean there as well, and I'm excited about that. So stay tuned next week for some really fun shows from the Bahamas as we're sailing, and that's going to be a great time. So that's all coming up then. For now, though, a lot to get into when it comes to UGA recruiting. Guys who have been at G-Day or been at Georgia a lot recently who have said some pretty interesting things about the Dogs right now. Georgia may be trending for a number of 5-star prospects and a lot of big names post G-Day. Let's get all the information on that before John Fitzpatrick joins us a little bit later on. It's Jeff Santel here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. Glad to have him and all of you with us here today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So Jeff Santel joins us here, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. I'm sure Jeff's excited about being on board the cruise, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, before we're done. But Jeff, let me kind of take care of plenty of business before we get to any of that happy talk. A lot of recruiting stuff to break down. You've had great stuff at DawgNation.com on this over the course of the last couple of days. And I want to begin with Jamal Jarrett here for a moment because this is a guy that I think that Georgia fans have gotten pretty acquainted with because of some of the things that you've written. And when you think about those big, dominant defensive linemen that were such an important part of Georgia's national championship a year ago, replacing what's leaving there becomes really important. Pretty good crop of that here on the 2022 roster. But for future Georgia teams, a guy like Jarrett would certainly look pretty good in a Georgia uniform. He's got a list of finalists that have come out here as of late. And it seems like, best you can tell, Georgia's in a pretty good spot for Jarrett here right now.
Good morning, Brandon. If you would permit me, I might say the most profane thing I've ever said on your airwaves, and I would like to lead a chorus among everybody watching right now. When it comes to Jamal Jarrett, screw those rankings, man. Yeah. He's a 3-star defensive tackle. I don't know what world, maybe in the NFL. Here's the thing, Brandon. I know everybody gets caught up on rankings, and I got some feedback yesterday about, hey man, why are you this is a 3-star, and I'm like, dude, just trust me. This is a different cat. He's been to 2 camps this spring, Brandon. He's been the defensive line MVP of both camps. I think when we pop the hood on the Jamal Jarrett kind of rankings curiosity, what you see there is, man, it traces back to the JD 99 stuff. He was coming up. And like Brandon, I think 2 of the websites are still confused about, is this guy a defensive lineman? Is this guy an offensive tackle? And that's why his rating is skewed. He told me he had to go to a rivals camp in order to prove to him that he was a defensive lineman to get ranked as a defensive lineman. And all he's done is perform better than a lot of guys that are higher rated than him. And Brandon, we can walk back to memory jog. Jordan Davis was also seen as a 3-star. He was also a big, large, imposing young man. And some people always wondered, is he an offensive tackle? Is he a defensive tackle? And you've got a little bit of Devontae Wyatt now in Jamal Jarrett's story at 6'6", 350. He ran a 12-2 relay leg on the track for the big man track relays for Grimsley High School this past spring.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, and the Davis story, I remember talking about this when Davis was a recruit, that sometimes I think it's hard to measure those guys the way the recruiting industry would typically measure somebody, because sometimes you don't have a lot to go on necessarily. You know, it's not going to be always a lot of stats in the games themselves, and sometimes the kind of athletic credentials that a player might show off at a camp, you know, a big defensive lineman doesn't always get the chance to do that. I mean, I think that, you know, even, you know, maybe Kirby Smart's even said something to this effect before, that, you know, sometimes from a recruiting ranking standpoint, what dominates the interior of a defensive line just doesn't show up in that ranking, you know, process, you know, very well. So, you know, given the you know, recent level of not exactly elite recruits that have played really well for UGA, you know, I kind of find myself less interested in some of those rankings than I used to. Now, listen, that doesn't change the fact that you still have to have a lot of former 4- and 5-star recruits on your roster, and clearly Georgia will continue to do that. But when you see a lot of guys who had a lesser profile having great success at UGA, I just think you kind of start to expect, well, you know, maybe the Georgia offer is the actual recruiting credential, that the 4- and 5-star is nice, but the presence of a committable offer to UGA, that probably means more than maybe anything else, just given the level of scouting prowess Georgia's proven itself to have.
Yeah, especially, I think it's funny, Travion Scott is a great example. I think if anybody has any doubts about what that young man can do with evaluation and development, I think those will be answered next Thursday while we're floating down in the Caribbean, Brandon. You know, Jamal's a guy that has an over-the-top personality. He's fun to talk to, kind of like Jordan as well. And Brandon, I know you saw it. Perhaps the best rankings you could ever do is you could put the side-by-side of Jamal Jarrett next to Jordan Davis at the national championship celebration back on January the 15th. And we have pictures of that in their most recent story on DawgNation.com. And it's a high school junior side by side with a young man who graduated high school in 2018 that will be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. And if you want to look at it really closely, Jamal Jarrett is the bigger man, and that's kind of crazy.
It really is. Move on, talk about a couple of other guys here too. A guy that you've also written about recently at DawgNation.com, Samuel Bapemba, the athlete out of IMG Academy. Seems like Georgia might be moving in a pretty good direction for him. I'm curious about that, but I'm also curious how you think a guy like that would be used at a place like Georgia.
Yeah, Brandon, Coach Chud is what all the players call him. And, Brandon, we got to ring the bell here for Coach Chidera Uzo-Diribe, man. I don't know if anybody, if we just graded our Georgia recruiters on the trail, the assistant coaches, the on-field coaches on the trail, and we recruited them for what they did, what they've done so far from mid-January to right now, I don't know if I'd have anybody much higher than Coach Chid. He is really getting after it. He's got Georgia right in kind of an enviable poolside position with all of Georgia's, you know, high-profile outside linebacker Wolfpack edge targets. And, Brandon, you're going to like this kid, Samuel Mpemba. First of all, I thought it was very inspiring and powerful how, and whoever in the UGA recruiting lab that does this stuff, that figured this out, his family, now he's from St. Louis, but his family's from Togo, the West African nation of Togo. And they just happened to have a Togo flag nearby when he was taking his photo shoot pictures for his most recent visit. That was a plus. That was very impressive to me. I'd never quite seen a Georgia recruiting photo quite like that. And the other thing is that, Brandon, he started at tight end last year for IMG Academy. That says two things. Number one, I know you like that IMG Academy brand that says a starter as a junior. That's a recruiting ranking in and of itself. And then you've got Mpemba that's seen as an outside linebacker at Georgia. He was rated as the nation's number 2 athlete, number 18, I think 16, 17 overall in the country. And Brandon, here's the kicker. Never taken a visit to Georgia before. Love Georgia coming out of the visit. And really, he has to go back. And this is another time for me to, you know, maybe maybe echo and just, give an attaboy or a helmet sticker to Coach Chidera Uzudaribe again here. Brandon, he was recruiting this young man, Samuel Mpemba, back when he was at Kansas. Brandon, that was like 3 jobs ago for him, like 2 or 3 years ago, because he's went from SMU to TCU to Georgia from Kansas over the last 2 or 3 years of his career. But that's a great relationship that he has with Sam. And Sam really loves Georgia. Georgia's going to get an official visit. Georgia's one of his top schools. And, Brandon, that's the type of place you want to be in right now with a young man as talented as Samuel Mpemba.
I think that's exactly right. It's great to see. And, a lot of this energy kind of continuing to kind of stream off of what happened for G-Day on Saturday. Another guy that's kind of in that 5-star category is Jaden Wayne, who, Georgia seemed to be in a good position with. The G-Day visit kind of coming on the heels of his mother visits to Athens here lately. And it doesn't seem like the Georgia pursuit of Wayne's going to slow down anytime soon, right?
Yeah, so I think Georgia's visited Wayne this week already, and you've got a guy that, Brandon, I'll be honest, I don't know if he's going to go to Alabama or Oregon or Georgia, but I think Georgia's right there, and I think that the thing that's funny is he's been to the last he's been in the house the last 2 times Georgia has played a football game in Sanford Stadium. Now, that's no big deal if you live in Duluth or you live in Decatur or you live in Dunwoody. That's a big deal when you live in the Washington, Tacoma, Bellevue, Washington area, where that's like 2,700 miles away. And coming out of it, Brandon, I thought it's some of the strongest interview feedback I've gotten in a while from a Georgia recruit. He said he could see himself there. He said the brotherhood is ridiculous. What he really noticed, Brandon, is, he didn't get fooled by maybe, oh my gosh, all these former players are here, because he knew that Georgia was giving out rings. So that's why all those NFL dogs that were going to be there, that was a plus for him because he got to see development. But the big thing is he looked around and he started seeing J.R. Reed. He started seeing Brian Harrion. He started seeing Jonathan Ledbetter. He started seeing Malik Herring. He's like, hold on. You mean these guys went to school here and they're not getting a ring, but they're still here for G-Day? And they had glowing things to say about Georgia. What he noticed, and he said it very strongly a couple times, he says that the atmosphere and the brotherhood at Georgia is ridiculous. To that point, I often ask recruits that hit a back-to-back from Alabama to Georgia to kind of compare and contrast those experiences. And he said one big thing that separates the feeling at Alabama and then the feeling at Georgia is the brotherhood at Georgia. Consequently, Brandon, one of the things he's really looking for in a college destination is a place where it feels like a brotherhood. It feels like a family. He feels connected. And, Georgia's Keely Ringo actually grew up in Washington, actually played on the same youth teams as Jaden Wayne, and that is another plus there for Georgia in recruiting Jaden Wayne.
You mentioned a moment ago Chidera Uzudaribe. How involved is he in this recruitment here when it comes to the edge rusher Wayne?
Very involved. It was funny. Jaden Wayne was kind of funny. Last year, he didn't know whether Georgia liked him or really, really liked him or loved him. And then once they got that straightened out with Dan Lanning, then he was really interested in Georgia. Well, there's been really no demarcation or deviation or any sort of trial for him to figure out whether Coach Chid likes him. They've been recruiting him heavy. They see him as a guy that can play the edge for Georgia. Now, Brandon, he's about 6'4". He's about 245 right now. He punts for his high school team. And, hey, here's another common denominator for Coach Chid's guys. Starts at tight end, starts on offense at wide receiver, makes a lot of plays in the passing game. And, Brandon, when you're bringing a young man or trying to bring a young man to the SEC to chase down playmakers, and he is a playmaker in and of itself when he plays on the offensive side of the ball, it just shows the skill set that Georgia's going for at outside linebacker, Brandon. They want him bigger, they want him longer, and they want those type of guys that look like basketball power forwards out there.
No, I think that's a really good description. I guess my point about Uzudaribe is it just sort of seems like that, obviously for a lot of Georgia fans when he was first hired, there's this quick rush trying to figure out who this guy is, what he means for Georgia. And, the presence of a Georgia assistant coach in the recruiting trail is always going to bring a certain level of hype with it. But in the case of Uzudaribe, it seems it's a little different than that he really, the best that I can tell based on your reporting and just kind of the online chatter that exists, truly is making a big name for himself. in his early stages of his Georgia career. It's not a surprise necessarily that Georgia's involved with a guy like Wayne or Mpemba, or we'll talk about Gabe Harris in a moment. Some of these guys that Georgia is in the mix for, that's a yearly story. But for a guy like Uzo Duribe, who was not well known when he first was hired at Georgia, to become as well known as quickly as he has with the recruits that truly matter, I think it does speak to what he has a chance to be on this Georgia staff, which is a guy that fits in well with the kind of dynamite recruiters that Kirby has typically hired.
Yeah, Brandon, I think he was playing college football back in 2015, so he's pretty still close to that age. And a lot of the players, the prospects, they tell me that, man, he's got so much energy, man. He makes us feel tired a little bit. And then they get him on the practice field, and he finds another gear. I think he's extremely relatable, Brandon. And, the other thing with him, and Brandon, he just parachuted into Georgia like mid-January. And what he has done, and he was already calling his high-profile targets. He was already calling those guys on the way to the Georgia job when he was driving, to talk about it. He was like, hey, man, I might go here. This might be working out for me. And that's a man that has a plan. And what he's done really, basically, Brandon, is give Georgia A1A territory with all of his marquee guys really quickly in 2-3 months on the job. He's a guy that I think is going to be very effective in this profession. I see him rising in this profession, and really the young men really, really relate to him.
How about Gabe Harris? I said this on Monday that to me, G-Day was a little bit of a throwback to maybe pre-pandemic or kind of a time back before Georgia's recruiting dominance was such a sure thing, where UGA fans, I think, were hoping the spring game could be a springboard. Hey, who can you have on campus and who can you excite because of the show that you kind of put on? Georgia football recruiting's kind of become a little bit of a machine, in recent years. And it's almost like you don't really need any, catalyst for recruiting success. It seems to take care of itself. But on Saturday, it seemed to be a little bit of a throwback to that, whether it be high-profile decommitment from a player committed elsewhere who was on campus, or kind of the classic spring game commitment coming off the heels of that with Gabe Harris. Felt a little bit like a throwback to me to kind of a bygone age back when Georgia fans were craving recruiting success a lot more than they maybe are now, where they just sort of expect it to be the case. But G-Day does result in the Harris commitment. What can you tell us about him and just the overall vibe for recruits who were there on Saturday?
Brandon, it's funny. Your eyes do not deceive, sir. I think maybe you caught a glimpse of Christian Miller in the throwback Kirby Smart jersey.
That's right. I did see. Yeah, that was really cool. Yeah, that was a very fun photo. I did see that.
And then you saw C.J. Allen, who is a priority linebacker for Georgia out of Middle Georgia, out of Lamar County. He was wearing a throwback Malcolm Mitchell jersey.
Nice.
And it's like, I asked him why he wore the Malcolm Mitchell jersey, and there's some news coming with C.J. Allen, but like he wore the Malcolm Mitchell jersey because Schumann is his position coach, potential position coach. Schumann is his recruiter of record, and Schumann was coaching for the red team, so he had to wear a red jersey to support the guy recruiting him, and that's what he did. And you mentioned Gabe Harris. This is what's interesting. Brandon, on the low, Gabe Harris silently committed to Georgia back in March. That was a great weekend in March. Let me just say that. And he was kind of going to wait till the summer. Florida was in there. Florida State was in there. He wanted to take some officials, but the young man just got to Georgia Easter weekend, and he's like, man, what am I waiting for? This is home. Coach Shadira Uzo Duribe. This might be the Shadira, Coach Chud podcast special here from DawgNation Daily, but that was another guy. He put Georgia right there in the checkmate position to get the recruit, and they did. And now he's part of the class. He's another edge defender. Georgia's going to have to get a couple more of those guys in this 2020-23 reload cycle at the outside linebacker position. But, it was one of those weekends, Brandon, where Georgia got in pretty cozy with a lot of guys. And it was, again, Easter weekend. The weather wasn't great. There were still 68,000 people in the stands. Wasn't 93K day, but it was still very impressionable. Perhaps just as impressionable because everybody got to see the rings and the players were so jubilant, and then the recruits could kind of feed off that energy a little bit. And Brandon, man, you haven't even asked me about the wide receiver that snuck his way in there, man. We got a lot to talk about the wide receiver.
We'll finish with that here right now, if you don't mind, then.
So we got, Brandon, this is what's different about Hakeem Williams. And I said this on our Before the Hedges program on Wednesday. Somewhere in the expectation threshold between George Pickens and AJ Green might want to be where the folks should get excited about Hakeem Williams.
Wow.
For a couple of reasons. And, this is not just a recruiting analyst trying to, hype up this story a little bit, but Brendan, even Nick Saban himself compared him to Julio Jones. So if I'm
Wow.
sitting here going somewhere between George Pickens and AJ Green, that's being somewhat conservative with my projection there. Shows up at Georgia wearing a Georgia hat. He just at Georgia, Brandon, like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then what he does, Brendan, and this is what I thought was very curious. Normally the 2023s hang out with other 2023s. They hang out with recruits. Guess where Hakeem Williams sat? He sat right in the mix of Marvin Jones Jr., Christian Miller in that Kirby Smart jersey, Dylan Bell. I mean, he was right in the middle of 2022 signee Central, hanging out with those guys. And he's just like, man, I like those guys. They let me hang with them. I fit in. So I just wanted to hang out with them.
That's nice.
Those are all very encouraging signs for someone that already tells me without a doubt that Georgia's going to get an official visit. Brandon, remember I said screw those rankings earlier?
Sure.
I'm maybe not screwing the rankings here on Hakeem Williams, but number 6 wide receiver in the country, number 39 overall. That sucker's only going to go up. Brandon, 6'3", 195. Very entertaining high school film. Looks like he can run every route. Miami's in there. Georgia's in there. Pitt is in there. That's a good group for Georgia to be in right now. And Brandon, Hakeem Williams, if he comes to the University of Georgia, if he signs to the University of Georgia, I think he's going to be as talented and as big as an overall all-around wide receiver as Kirby Smart has ever signed.
Boy, Jeff, that is exciting news. Great evaluation of what Williams brings to the table. I know you've got some more stuff coming on him at DawgNation.com here in the next bit there as well. Jeff, the next time I see you, we'll be basking in the Florida sunshine, setting sail towards the Bahamas on Independence of the Seas. Can't wait to do that with you and Royal Caribbean here next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to see you there.
It's called working hours, Brandon. I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around that, but maybe it might be National Championship celebration hours on the Royal Caribbean. I think it's Harmony of the Seas. Did I get that right, Brandon?
We're on Independent. Right? We're on Independence of the Seas. If you get on Harmony of the Seas, you're going somewhere else. We're on Independence of the Seas.
That's what I keep you around for, Brandon. Harmony.
Right. We'll make sure you get on the right ship, Jeff. Enjoy the weekend. We'll see you there.
Yes, sir.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, got to be careful with Jeff. He didn't get on the wrong ship there. By the way, we'll have John Fitzpatrick, former Georgia tight end, here coming up in just a couple of minutes. Excited about that here today. And by the way, speaking of Royal Caribbean, let's go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean here just for a moment. Yeah, we're going to be in Independence of the Seas heading towards next week. I'm excited about that. And you can get excited about your own Royal Caribbean cruise vacation coming up there as well. You know, a lot of folks in our comment section have been saying that, BA, I wish I could be with y'all, and I wish you could be there too. And if you can't, have your own plans for your own Royal Caribbean vacation, because let me tell you this, it's going to be a great time. We're going to try to bring you some of the sights and sounds as well as the typical Georgia football conversation that we're always a part of. We'll just be doing it in the fun and the sun of the Bahamas there next week. But check out our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority, and you can get locked in on your own Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. This is a great time to do that. You can really tell cruising is back in a big way. And I know the energy on the ship next week is just going to be great. So I'm excited about that. We'll kind of bring you all the fun there of it, but you're going to make your own plans, get on your own Royal Caribbean cruise ship here coming up very soon. Our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority can help you do that. Check them out, tcava.com, if you want to do more there. All right, before we get John Stinchcomb, I keep saying John Stinchcomb. It is John Fitzpatrick, the former Georgia tight end, who's going to join us. Before we get John Fitzpatrick, let me go and do a little bit of cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean before we get there. So ESPN has updated its way too early top 25. Connor Riley had a story about this at DawgNation.com. And Georgia kind of right there where you probably expected to be, right there around number 3. Obviously, to me, this speaks to a team that's very much in that college football playoff, national championship conversation once again. Georgia essentially in the same spot now it was a year ago in all of these kinds of, whether it be, polls like this, opinion polls or analytics metrics. Georgia's about the same spot that it was last season. I don't think in the true eyes of the objective observer, those outside the bubble of DawgNation, Georgia's actually all that much less of a national championship contender this year than it was before. There weren't tons of people predicting Georgia to win the national championship last year, in other words. So the scenario for Georgia's kind of not really changing. I even said this off the top of the program, that Georgia's a very business-like program, and most years are kind of business as usual. This is kind of one of those deals where Georgia once again kind of starts the season in the eyes of most in that preseason top 3, top 4, right there in the list of most likely playoff teams by the end of the year. However, here's one of the things I think you start to look at there a bit is, okay, well, if Georgia is a very likely playoff team, and if Alabama is there as well, 2 SEC teams a year ago, maybe the same thing happens again this year, it seems pretty easy to draw a path for Ohio State out of the Big Ten. Where's your 4th playoff team coming from? And if you look at the teams that are ranked, high in the ESPN ranking, Clemson's at 11th, but we've seen them deal with major quarterback concerns. Oklahoma State's at 10, kind of faded maybe a little bit down the stretch. Michigan's at 9. You saw what they looked like against a real team last year in Georgia. They were lucky enough to beat Ohio State at home last year, but they have to go on the road this year. Michigan State's at 8. I don't know how seriously you take that. NC State's at 7. I know you don't take that seriously, nor should you. Then you get Notre Dame at 6. We've seen that before. Texas A&M's at 5. Is there even a possibility of 3 SEC teams in the playoff? Utah's at 4. I'll believe that when I see it. The point is, I think it becomes very interesting to figure out who your 4th playoff team is. Very easy to put Georgia and Alabama back in there because of what Ohio State brings back, especially on offense. Easy to put them in there too. But man, the debate might be around who is the 4th most likely playoff team for the upcoming season. The way too early ESPN Top 25 probably starts that. Believe it or not, there are still 2 SEC spring games left on the schedule for Saturday. Georgia obviously finished up last week, but a couple of other SEC teams finish up this week. It is Lsu Spring Game, the debut for Brian Kelly, so to speak, as LSU head coach, and it's also the Grove Bowl in Oxford there for Ole Miss. And for the most part, both these spring games going to really focus in pretty heavily on the quarterback situation. There are 3 guys at LSU battling it out right now. Garrett Nussmeier, remember him a couple of years ago. That's a pretty big-time recruit that up to this point hasn't had a chance to show very much at LSU. We'll see it. Look at him there tomorrow. Then there is Miles Brennan, who's kind of a favorite son there in the state of Louisiana, a guy who's been at LSU for quite some time. Let's face it, he's had chances to win the starting job before and has not been able to come up and do that. And now both those guys, Nussmeier and Brennan, competing against the recent transfer to the program, which is Jaden Daniels out of Arizona State. You know the Daniels story. He was a real hot prospect early in his career, but probably has, to be frank, faded some since then. The Arizona State program has also faded some there as well, so maybe Daniels' issues are related to where he was playing. Maybe the change of scenery gives him a new look. But interesting to see if the newcomer looks to be the favorite to win the LSU job, or if a guy like Brennan, who's now stuck around, at one point in time looked like he might transfer out, changes his mind, to see if he gets the nod there on that. And then at Ole Miss, here's something worth watching, especially if you're reading news reports coming out of Oxford as of late. So Jackson Dart is the transfer from USC there to Ole Miss, and most folks, I think, assume that he'll be the starting quarterback for Ole Miss this season. But there's been a little talk as of late about Luke Altmaier, who is from Starkville, competing there alongside, a lot less attention than Dart, the USC transfer. But it sounds like Altmaier's had a pretty good spring, and it sounds like he may be actually a real threat in this quarterback competition right now. The Grove Bowl for Ole Miss, in other words, could be a little bit interesting on Saturday. So a couple of spring games there to tide you over for football season here this weekend. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And here, as promised on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, I want to get ready to say hello to a guy that on Saturday got to do something that every football player dreams of doing. That's sliding on that national championship ring. Huge ovation from the crowd there for G-Day as it happened. He is a great former Dog, a guy who represented this program so well during his time there at UGA, and a guy we've known around here for a long time, going back to an old Marlowe's Tavern visit from a number of years ago. It is John Fitzpatrick here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. John, congratulations on a great career and a great season, and welcome here to our program here today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So I got to ask you, how did it feel to put the ring on Saturday? This is the kind of thing that when you were with us at Marlowe's a few years ago, this is the kind of thing that Georgia fans really craved, and they were hoping your recruiting class would be the one that brought this home, and come to find out that's exactly the way it worked out. A lot of Georgia fans had a lot of long-time wishes that were satisfied by that championship season that you were part of this year. What has it felt like to put that ring on and be received by the fans because of the success that you all enjoyed?
Yeah, it felt amazing. It meant the world to, obviously the fans, but to our team, our recruiting class. Coming in with Jamari, Quay, all those guys, 4 years of hard work, all that hard work, comes to fruition. And you came up short a few years, the last couple of years, and finally to get over the hump, it was really the best feeling in the world.
So I've got to ask you this. I don't really know what the etiquette is necessarily. I know what I would do. I'd be wearing it all the time. But do you think you will wear the ring? Is it just too big, too nice to wear very much? Is it the kind of thing that you're going to put in a safe somewhere and make sure that it, stays looking pristine? How much do you think you will wear it? And I guess how typical is it for a player to want to kind of go off and show that thing off from time to time? Do you think you'll wear it much?
I think there's going to be a wide variety. For me, I'm probably not going to wear it too often. It's pretty big. The ring is huge, and then also it's like big on my finger. And it kind of weighs my hand down. So, I don't know if I'll be wearing it too much. Maybe to some events here and there. There's definitely some guys that are gonna be wearing it all the time, which is pretty funny. But no, there's definitely a wide range.
When you look back on the year that was, what's your memory of all of this? I mean, your experience is obviously different than those of us who, were at the games or watched it on television. You lived through it. You contributed to it. When you look back on your time in that very special season, how does it show up as a memory in your mind?
Yeah, so I said this to someone else recently, but obviously the national championship, that game, the reaction after, it was insane. It was one of the best feelings ever. But the things that I'm looking back on and smiling are the 5 a.m., 6 a.m. runs in late July, running to the stadium, running up the stadiums, all that stuff, all the hard work that went into it. The Tuesday practice against Florida, where we were going head to head, some fights breaking out, stuff like that I'm looking back on and smiling on, that I'm going to hold forever.
I'm curious, and we've talked about this before, is that there is an element of football that's not glamorous, right? Like when you're getting a championship ring and you're interviewing with NFL teams and everybody's patting you in the back, that obviously, I'm sure, feels pretty good. But there is an element of, as you said, those very early morning workouts in the dead of summer, kind of when the season seems very long way away, where it's just not very glamorous. I mean, I'm sure from a mindset standpoint, you have to train yourself to believe that it's all worth it, that it's all adding towards something, whether it be for yourself individually, for the team collectively. I'm sure your mind probably plays some pretty funny tricks on you in a situation like that, where you probably ask yourself some impolite questions of, man, why am I pushing myself so hard? Is this really what I want to do with my life? And, to kind of push through that and to go on to be the best version of yourself, I'm sure that takes a certain level of mental training, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely does. And after the Peach Bowl last January, we saw the talent that we had in the room, but we knew there was something missing. And I think that leads me to talking about the skull sessions that we took upon. Coach Cochran and Coach Smart kind of introduced them in maybe February. And, we all got split into groups, and I'd lead a group with some teammates. And, I think that's what really, personally, that's what I think took us over the hump, is just having that more so connected team ever than before. And, we got to focus on a wide variety of topics, including mindset, including your why and what makes you go every single day, things like that. But, we got as close as we could to each teammate, freshmen to seniors to walk-ons to different position groups and everyone in between. And I think that's what really carried us.
Obviously, your position was the hot topic coming out of G-Day, and, Brock was injured not playing. Darnell was injured not playing. Technically, you could have come back. You've chose to move on to the NFL here now. But even with what was on display on Saturday, it seems like this is about as deep a position group as it ever could be. Are you ever amazed at just how much talent has been collected at one spot at one time? Obviously, Todd Hartley seems to have done a great job of putting all those guys in the room together and also figuring out how to get them used there as well. But do you ever just stop and remark about just how much exceptional talent exists at the tight end position at Georgia here at the moment?
Yeah, no, it's incredible seeing the talent in that room. It's 5 guys, 6 guys deep that all play and all can play. And I think it's hats off to Coach Hartley and Coach Smart, the way they recruit, the way they bust their tails, flying all over the country, getting these top guys. And it's paying dividends, obviously. But no, it's special, and it's pretty cool because there's so many different personalities, so many different talents, and Coach Hartley finds a way to make sure that we all complement each other. We can all, play on the field at the same time, and use our different skill sets to find success.
So right now you're in the process of moving on to the NFL, and it's kind of interesting. This is the kind of thing that even those of us who obviously watch all the games on Saturday and look forward to the draft, there's an element of this in-between time, this pre-draft process that does kind of take place behind closed doors. And the sense that I get, it's a little bit like almost like a job interview of any kind. College graduates are, flying around and moving around and, trying to get the attention of future employers. And you're kind of doing the same kind of thing like that right now from an NFL standpoint. What's it been like for you? How nerve-wracking has it been? Maybe that's the wrong way to describe it. But for those of us who won't experience this, what's it been like for you to kind of introduce yourself to the NFL community here over the course of the last couple of months?
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind of emotions, I'd say. The first 2 months were a grind, coming off the 2 surgeries, in a scooter to crutches to a boot for 2 months straight, 2.5 months. That was pretty tough, getting up the stairs, hearing my roommates yell at me because I was too loud in the morning, something like that. But I just tell them to shut up. But you get off crutches, and then the Zooms, the phone calls, the texts, and then visits start to kick up a little bit. And this month of April has been, pretty hectic, but it's been, I have enjoyed it a lot. I've been to a lot of great cities, meeting new coaches and teams and personnel within their facility, and I've enjoyed it a ton.
That's great to hear. I'll finish with this. Obviously, the Georgia team that it remains with you moving on and so many of your teammates moving on still has high hopes for the upcoming season. You talked a moment ago about the way in which, kind of establishing the right mindset and talking with your teammates about that led to the success that you enjoyed last season. In fact, I actually remember you saying that even some before the season took place a year ago. How does this 2022 team replicate that? Maybe it's not exactly the same kind of thing because maybe each year kind of takes on its own form here, but for a group of Georgia players who want their moment in the sun the same way you all got that a year ago, what would be your message to them about how they can go out and kind of create their own legacy the same way the 2021 team obviously did a season ago?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is finding their own identity. I think, realizing that they're not the 2021 national championship team. Yeah, there's a lot of carryover. There's a lot of guys from that team, but they have to find their own identity. A bunch of leaders have to step up. There was probably 15 to 20 leaders on this past team that would step up at different times, which, I thought it made it easier on the coaches because they didn't have to get into us as much as they did in years past. I thought it was pretty cool to see all the guys stepping up. So I think the 2 biggest things are finding their own identity and then having as many leaders step up in different ways.
Well, John, I know it's an incredibly busy time for you, and I certainly appreciate you making some time here for us. It was great to see you all get a chance to put those championship rings on Saturday. You have been a part of a lot of great memories for many UGA fans, so congratulations on a great career. Congratulations on a terrific season. Best of luck as you move towards the NFL. And as I told our audience a moment ago, we remember you as a recruit and some time we spent with you back then, and to see how your career's progressed since then has just been really, really enjoyable for so many of us. So best of luck, and we hope we get a chance to talk to you here very soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
All right, great stuff there. John Fitzpatrick, the terrific former Georgia tight end, who is a good one. And when you are an NFL franchise who's, looking for, what you need on your roster, there's a lot that John Fitzpatrick can do for you that I think is going to get a lot of attention from them. A guy who's going to be willing to be the part of the physical part of all of this. And clearly, you hear him right there. He was such a prominent spokesman for Georgia so much during his career. And in the interview right there, easy to imagine that he makes a great case for himself during some of these pre-draft interviews that he's doing with so many of these NFL teams right now. So we certainly wish him well on all of that. Let me remind you, too, if you haven't done so already, this is a great time. Okay, we'll do a little finished long drink here. Make sure you check out the long drink online at thelongdrink.com, and you can enjoy yourself 4 different varieties of the finished long drink. There's the traditional, it comes in the blue can, which is kind of a grapefruit flavor with a gin kick. There is long drink strong, that's 8.5% alcohol by volume. Long drink cranberry, that's a it's a ready to drink cocktail with that kind of nice little cranberry flavor. Very popular in my neighborhood. A lot of folks enjoy that. A lot of you have tried that there as well. Long drink zero, no carbs, no sugar. And you're like, but yeah, I've heard you talk about this finished long drink, but I'm still not exactly sure what it is. That's why you need to try some and understand that it comes in a can. So a lot of folks think, well, it must just be like a beer, but it's not really like a beer. It's like a ready-to-drink cocktail. It's a new category, fun category. And for those of you that like mixed drinks, but maybe you don't want to mix it yourself, this is already mixed for you. Just pop the top, drink it. You're ready to enjoy that, or pour it in a glass, and you're ready to enjoy all of that too. And if you're at a golf course, a lot of these golf courses around my area kind of have that. You're at a bar, you're at a beverage store, just a lot of fun places to try the finished long drink. A lot of folks enjoying it there around Athens this past weekend for G Day. That was cool to see. And you can try it yourself, thelongdrink.com for more on that. Thelongdrink.com for more on that. All right, let me also give a shout out here to our Kroger Championship Moms celebration. We just talked to a champion a moment ago, John Fitzpatrick, what it felt like to bring home that championship. And obviously in our state, there have been a lot of championships to celebrate here as of late, which is kind of a fun thing. And it kind of leads us into something we enjoy doing this time of year anyway, courtesy of our friends at Kroger. That's celebrating the championship moms in our life, whether it be your mom or your wife. I continue to be amazed by, what my wife does on a daily basis, taking care of our kids, things I don't even think about, that she's just constantly thinking about trying to get us where we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to do. Schedules, mine just like yours, very hectic this time of year, but she just handles it with always plenty of grace. And is it a plum? Is that a word? Grace and a plum? She handles it very well. And you see this in your own life with your own mom or your wife or your daughter who's a mom now, or whatever story you have about that. This is a great chance to celebrate that with our Kroger Championship Mom. So do this, please, if you don't mind. She deserves to have her story told. So go to info@DawgNation.com and tell her story. And coming up, we're going to draw out 5 winners of the Championship Moms courtesy of Kroger. And if your mom, the one in your life, is the winner, what a great gift pack she's going to receive. I'm talking about a bunch of gift cards, which includes Bath & Body Works, Home Chef, and of course Kroger. And our friends at Sequest at Stonecrest are also going to give 4 annual passports to each of our winners there as well. So you've got between now and April 29th to do this. So we'll continue to tell you about this leading into that. But go to info@DawgNation.com. Tell your story via email. We'll draw out 5 winners at random. And then as we head towards Mother's Day, I'll announce winners, tell their story here live on the air, and we'll give some great gift packs courtesy of our friends at Kroger as the Kroger Championship Mom celebration rolls on. All right, so the next time I talk to you will be from Port Canaveral, Florida. That's on Monday. There you go, getting ready to get on board. Independence of the Seas, really looking forward to doing all that. So on Monday, I don't know that I properly explained this earlier, we're going to be doing a semi-normal show there from Port Canaveral. That'll be, live in the moment, interaction, of course, and all kinds of fun and surprises there as well. Then after that, we're getting on board, and all the fun begins. And then for the rest of the week here on this show, we'll give you the show from the Bahamas as we're sailing around there, having a great time, and hopefully just enjoying ourselves in such a huge way. And if you can't be there with us, man, we wish you could be. But for those of you who are on your way to Florida there with us to get on board Independence of the Seas, we will see you there for all of that. I mentioned a moment ago as well, John Fitzpatrick, former guest of ours at the Marlowe's Tavern, also brings to mind a story that Jeff Sentell wrote this week at DawgNation.com about Devontae Wyatt, who also ends his career at Georgia this year, and also a former Marlowe's Tavern guest of ours back when he was a recruit. Our buddy Bassin Dog on Twitter referenced that. We'll make him our golden shoe winner today, saying, I still remember the night Devontae walked in with DawgNation there at Marlowe's in Roswell. He shook everyone's hand in the room. We had no idea he'd develop into a potential future NFL first-round pick, and that's certainly one of those great stories from DawgNation's past, and it is really fun to watch these recruits grow up and become great players and find young men and move on to the NFL. And so glad to have Bass and Dog remembering all of that. We'll make him our golden shoe winner because of that. Gator hater updater, not as much happiness for these Florida fans as of late, because it's been 4,852 days since they've won a national championship. And more bad news to give them. 190 days from right now, Dogs back in Jacksonville, beating them again. It'll be Billy Napier's first loss in that series and simply Kirby Smart's next win. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you back Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We will talk to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. It's been warm. That means ACs are on. And if you're worried about yours, get the peace of mind you need. Get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Find them online at rsandrews.com, and they'll take really good care of you. Okay, we got to be somewhat fast with comments today because we got a lot going on. I'll do Facebook, I'll do YouTube, I'll do DawgNation.com, and we'll rock out of here on a Friday. Big weekend locally for sports. I guess Diamond Dogs in Tuscaloosa. Jonathan Cannon back pitching tonight, I believe that's correct. So that's something. But also Braves back home starting a series against the Marlins after what was obviously not a great West Coast road trip. And Hawks Game 3 against the Heat tonight there as well. So a lot going on here locally. Keith Fold says, how many on here were at the national championship game in 1980? Yeah, that's actually a really good question, Keith. It's one of those things where I'm really amazed, or not amazed. The word I'm looking for is interested. I'm really interested, intrigued by that period of Georgia football kind of just before I was old enough to really follow closely, like what the fan culture was like. You know, every now and then, and this is predating what you're talking about, but like say like the 76 Sugar Bowl will be on ESPN Classic or something like that. And I'm always like interested in the crowd shots. Like what do Georgia fans kind of look like in those, you know, kind of fun stories from back during that time. I'm always kind of amazed by that kind of thing. So I wouldn't, my point that I'm leading to is I think it'd be fun one day to do kind of I don't even call it an oral history or whatever else, but something that just kind of allows folks to tell the story of what was it like being on Bourbon Street when that's all said and done. You know, what was it like to kind of be there for it, especially now that Georgia's got a modern day, you know, contemporary championship to celebrate. I think it makes going back and looking at what happened on that night, January 1st of 1981, you know, more fun to think about. Miriam Corbin says, I was with my entire family watching together. Wonderful memories with them. Yeah, that's really fun. Really fun. Let's see what else. Joseph Kennedy, very funny. Bill Kelly trying to stir the pot there. That's funny. Miriam Corbin says she's got her family reservations for the Georgia-Florida game. You always love to see that. That's great to see. Good to see Kathy Aquavia Green stopping by. I saw Kathy at G-Day briefly on Saturday, too. Always one of our great commenters. Moose Thames checking in there as well. Shelton Tucker, a ray of sunshine as always. But it's good to see Shelton in here today. Kathy Aquavia Green, yeah, I wish you were on the trip too. She says she's a little jelly of us. Well, listen, Kathy, I wish you could be there. Maybe one day we can all take one together. Bill Sanders says BA with the belly flop into the pool. I don't know that I can quite pull that off. I did do the Flow Rider thing. Do you mind showing the Royal Caribbean video for a second? We'll see if we can show the Flow Rider here in a minute. I did the Flow Rider the last cruise I was on. Now, I don't know if I'm going to do it on this one or not. Maybe I will. But I didn't do the stand-up Flow Rider, but I did like the kneeboard Flow Rider. I actually did a little better than I probably thought I would. My wife's pretty good at it. She's just a little bit more, you know, I don't know, nimble than I am, I guess. But eventually it'll show it on this video. You'll see the Flow Rider. So I did the kneeboard Flow Rider. It's actually really fun, first of all. Yeah, so that's the Flow Rider right there. That's a stand-up Flow Rider. I did not do that, nor could I do that. And this is Odyssey of the Seas, by the way. This is a little bit different ship than we're going to be on, a little bit different class of ship. But I did do the kneeboard Flow Rider. Did pretty well. Did pretty well with that. I do think our ship has one of those. I think it's, what do you call it? The iFly thing. Not that, but yeah. So this is the Flow Rider. That's stand up. I could not do that, but the kneeboard Flow Rider I did. Now listen, those waves, you know, they get you going pretty good. So there's a lot of fun things to do on board a Royal Caribbean ship. So no belly flop for me, but you never know what else you might see going on there. Let's see what other folks are saying here. Philip Jordan Wells, very funny in here as per usual. Bill Hodgins says the 1980 season, the best game that year was actually the Herschel-George Rogers showdown. Everyone in the stadium stood up at kickoff and didn't sit down the entire game. I have heard really good things about that with Rogers, who I guess was did Rogers win the Heisman in 80? Is that right? And then Herschel won it in 82. A lot of folks think he should have won it in 1980. Rogers being a Georgia guy, is from Duluth. I remember hearing stories of that being a very big deal. And that one is another one that'll occasionally be on, at least in the past, it's been on ESPN Classic and stuff like that. That's kind of a fun game to think about there. Let's see what else. Wade Walford says, if Georgia's defense this year is as good as our offense was last year, we will repeat as national champions. That's an interesting point that, when you think about Georgia, like cleared far and away the number one defense in the country last year, offense from an analytics standpoint, probably in like that top 5 range. He says, listen, you don't have to be number one in the country defensively. You can just be top 5-ish, stellar, but not necessarily historically dominant might be enough, and that might be the case. Phil Rogers says the Jaguars are getting ready to build a 4 or 5-star hotel right by the Gator Bowl. That's kind of interesting. There have been a lot of improvements to that area in recent years. Got the Daily Place over there now, which is where AEW is always wrestling. So there's some improvements in that area a little bit. Did they ever finish the landing thing that they were doing? They tore the landing up. They're going to kind of rebuild that back as something new. Did they ever finish that? I honestly don't know the answer to that. But they're trying to do some new things there in Jacksonville. A lot of Georgia fans only come to Jacksonville for the game anyway. I mean, pretty much the rest of the weekend is spent somewhere else. Over here on DawgNation.com for a moment. DT was at the 80 championship game. He says, I jumped up and down on the floor of the Superdome after the game. Yeah, a lot of fans did go on the field, which is the kind of thing you don't really see a lot of now. But certainly happened then. Rambo says, I often regret the lack of funds that kept me from attending the 80 Sugar Bowl. I went in 81, but that was not as memorable. Yeah, that was what the, pretty convincing loss to Pitt, I guess, the end of the 81 season. That was a very good Pitt team. But yeah, not a great day there for Georgia. Randy Hall says, please make sure Jeff gets on the right ship or not the minnow. It's going to be Sintel's Island. Yeah, let me tell you something. That'd be a reality show I'd love to watch. Jeff Sintel trying to get off an island. That'd be a pretty good one right there. Tiffany Art says, I had a conversation with Zion Loke's stepdad and stayed at the same hotel as Kamari Laster's parents. Always cool to see their people like us. Yeah, it is fun to see that. I do think that you do get a different sense for what Georgia football is when you meet, these parents of these players, because listen, we know the players from say 17 and 18 on, and they look like obviously fully grown men, and they're they're on their way in many cases to great football careers. But if you're the parents of one of these players, you see them very differently than that, because think about your own kids. Some of you have kids who are 17, 18 years old. I mean, doesn't it seem like 5 minutes ago they were 10? You know what I'm saying? There is, I think, that sense where they still view their kids as their children. And even though we sort of see them as the heroes of Georgia football, that's not the way the parents going to see these guys. And they care for them and love on them the same way any parent would a kid. Maybe as big as a full grown man, but to a mom and a daddy, that's still a person that seems like 5 seconds ago was a child. And so the emotional connection they obviously have together is just kind of a cool thing to remind ourselves of. Stuart Wiggins asking about Jamal Jarrett. We had actually a really good conversation with Jeff about Jarrett a little earlier in the show. If you want to you can go back on YouTube right now and just kind of rewind back to around the 20 or so minute mark of the show. We had a pretty good conversation on that. Cam Hasty says, my dad and I got to talk to Akili Ringo's mom and dad for quite a while at the parade. Super nice folks. Yeah, really can't say enough about that family. They are always so kind with Georgia fans that they interact with, and always fun to see. Yeah, so I'm glad you have a good report on that. Perfect Day BA, which is a very funny username, checks in to say, I think we will all be interested in a live from the Dog Cruise Cover 4, a chicken match in the pool. That's funny. That's funny. I like the idea of that. Scott Harris says they're going to put a hotel next to the Gator Bowl so Florida fans don't have a long car ride home to cry. Scott, I like that. That's really funny. Good stuff. Cam Hasty also suggesting Chris Conley on the show. Yeah, I don't know if we've ever had Chris, but Chris is certainly a sharp guy. That's a really good idea, actually. Really good idea. Richard D says, what sunblock brand and number does DawgNation does Brandon Adams endorse? So as far as the brand goes, I'm not really a brand ambassador for any sunscreen, but I am when I was in my 20s, I didn't use sunscreen at all. I mean, at all. Somewhere around my 30s, I started using a lot more because I want to see my 70s and 80s. So I am definitely big on sunscreen. I use a 70 on my face, and I probably, for a trip like this, I may go 100 on my, my body, arms and legs, things like that. I may go 100. Now listen, here's the thing I'm going to tell you, is that I'm still going to get plenty of sun. That's the thing, is that you can use a 70 or 100 sunscreen. You're still going to get plenty of sun, but you're not going to burn. So I am definitely a big believer in the sunscreen. First of all, because I think you get a better tan with sunscreen than you do without, and it's just also better for you, I guess. All right, let me go to YouTube here just for a moment. On the YouTube side of things here. Let's see what's going on. On YouTube, Foster Moss says, do you have the Florida 67ers or the 6 and 7ers making the Cheez-It Bowl this season? Foster, that's very funny. I like that. I like that here. Frank Patterson says, since the show isn't live next week, can I get a request that you talk 2023 running backs with Jeff on the boat? We need to bring in 3 this year, I believe. Yeah, we will talk about that, Frank. And I think I probably misrepresented one thing. We're still live on Monday and still live on Friday. And like the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays are not, it's not like we're recording those today. So we're going to record those like the night before and run them the day of. So they're not super, old when we air them. But Monday and Friday will still be live. But yeah, we'll do some running back talk, Frank. We sure will. We sure will. Jonathan Aaron says, since you are a wrestling fan, can I get 2 claps and a Ric Flair for your national championship, Georgia Bulldogs? Yeah, listen, I love the idea of the dog styling and profiling as national champions. I love that. Let's see what else. Jay Shipe says there's not enough. This is a very Jay Shipe's comment. He says there's not enough trolls in here today, B. I'm needing a light spar. That's actually really funny. Really funny. Paul Moon says, never forget Conley's entry into the Star Wars universe. Yeah, I mean, he's a really talented filmmaker type guy. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And when Conley, I feel like the technology's changed so much that almost anybody can make a movie now. Not anybody, but I'm saying, like the just the stuff that your phone has now can almost help you make a Hollywood movie if you really wanted to. But when Conley was doing that back when it was a lot different. So he's a very talented type guy. Let's see what else. Some of the folks in here talking about being like an 80s baby or a 90s baby or whatever else. See, like, I feel like my life has 2 distinctly different eras. Like, I was a child in the 80s. So that's like Back to the Future at the movie theater. That's like Hulk Hogan wrestling. Obviously, old days of Ric Flair and stuff like that. Braves playing at Fulton County Stadium with the white and blue and even the powder blue away uniforms. Like that's my childhood 80s. And then as I turned into a teenager, that's when the 90s started. It's kind of interesting that, like, for me, I feel like that my life in terms of growing up had 2 distinctly different eras. Like I heard somebody talking before about like grunge and stuff like that. Like all that 90s stuff was like, 8th grade. I graduated high school in 95, college throughout, finally finished up around 99. So like, my teenage years, into college graduation was all 90s, and my childhood years all 80s. So just kind of interesting to have like that 2, what I would say is distinctly different eras in all of that. Good time to grow up. I mean, I'm sure everybody feels that way about all the, whatever time they grew up as being a good time to grow up. But I feel like I got a lot of, fun experiences, all the childhood stuff. I just feel like the 80s were a good age to be a child. Like a lot of the TV, I don't know. It's like, I feel like a lot of the TV shows were fun for children in a way that would not be true in the future. It's like, NBC had like A-Team and Knight Rider and stuff like that. Obviously, CBS had Dukes of Hazzard. That's a little bit more of kind of a late 70s, early 80s thing. But you know what I'm saying? It's like a lot of like the network television shows were almost for kids, it seemed like. And so, I mean, for my money, I don't know if there was a better time to be a child than during the 80s because of how much of pop culture seemed to exist for kids. So, as I said, maybe everybody feels that way about their era, but I definitely feel like the 80s was a great time to be a child. Jay Shipe's trying to stir it up with Matt Rukavina, which is funny. That's funny. Scott Harris says, I grew up in the 70s, was a teenager for the Herschel years. Listen, I think that's probably pretty fun, too. Probably pretty fun, too. All right, one or two more, we got to go. Jay's trying to stir it up today, which is funny. DMart42 says, let's make this last 45 more minutes. I took half a day today. DMart, I'd love to be able to serve you on that, but we are going to have to go here in a minute. But I hope you enjoy some time off. Weather's beautiful. It's a good time to have some time off. Good stuff. DMart42 says, more confusion. I was born in November of 94, making me the last millennial. My wife was born January 95, making her a Gen X, I guess, despite having basically the same childhood. Yeah, it's funny. Like, I don't really get into too much about like the generations all have names. Like, I don't really get into some of that kind of stuff too much just because I find it to be, for me, a little tedious. But it is kind of funny. Like, if you really look at like the actual years that sort of span these generations, like, I mean, I think technically the millennial generation actually starts in 1980. I was born in 77. So, I mean, I'm technically only 3 years removed from having been a millennial by, technical, I guess, sense. But I guess I think of myself as more of a Gen X type guy. Jake Shipe says I'm like 6'4"-ish. I'm actually more like 6'2". I wish I was 6'4". If I stood up straight and tall, I've told y'all some before, I have a little bit of a bad posture thing. If I stood up straight and tall, I could almost get to 6'3", but I wish I was 6'4". Foster Moss says TV shows these days are ridiculous. Unfortunately, some of them are. Scott Harris says getting paid to talk sports and go cruising. He says, you the man. Yeah, listen, I am quite grateful. I am quite grateful. Skylar Thomas says, in college I played D1 basketball. I had one UGA stuff all over my room, and my teammates told my coach to make me take it down, but I never did. There you go. That makes you like, who was the guy that played at Florida last year that was the big Georgia football fan? He's transferred from Florida now. What was his name? He's from Athens, and like he made all the Florida people mad because he was cheering for Georgia in the national championship. That's funny. Jay Shipe says, I'm 6'1.5", used to be at least. Yeah, I got a chance to see Jay on Saturday. Let's Go Brandon says, the polo is suspiciously crimson. I promise you, in real life, it's not. Our studio lights just make some of this red look different, but this thing is as Georgia red as it gets. Paul Moon says, I get a lot of my entertainment from YouTube these days. I do find myself watching more YouTube for fun. I do find myself doing that. I mean, like this is a different topic for a different day, but I'm just not that satisfied with like Netflix right now. I just don't think there's like for me, there's 1,000 things on Netflix, but I don't think any of it's very good. I think I got a Netflix subscription around Christmas time or whatever because a couple things my kids wanted to see, and I thought, oh, good, this is a whole new like collection of entertainment. And a couple of things I guess I've liked, but for the most part, I just am not that impressed with what they have. I still think HBO is way better than Netflix, for instance. But like I said, that's kind of a different topic for a different day. Slim Pickens says, is it safe to say that UGA has the best running back and tight end room in all of college football? It could very well be safe to say that. Let's see what else. DMart42 also bringing up the fact that Netflix is going up in price. I thought that I mentioned on our podcast, we do a podcast cool down there as well, and I mentioned the other day about how there's a lot of interesting stuff going on when it comes to streaming and sports. We're about to have a lot more sports on streaming, and I kind of agree with what others have said, which is I'm not quite so sure that's a change for the better, because like the one thing for those of you, and I'm not usually home on a college football Saturday, but for those of you who are, like to have the remote in hand and just clicking from game to game to game to game, man, that's like the best part of it all, right? Especially if you really get your presets ready to go, so you can just kind of click from one to the other to the other to the other. That's really fun. And yet, in a streaming world, man, it's hard to do that. You have to like click into the thing, you have the spinning wheel for a second, now the game's up, and it's not like you're just flipping back and forth from game to game as much anymore. As sports moves more in the direction of streaming, making the technology a little bit more frictionless, I think is probably a right thing to do. Let's see what else. Final comments, and we're going to be gone. DT says if it doesn't have a ball, I don't watch it. No interest in Netflix content, to each his own. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I like to watch just a show. I mean, every now and then I like to watch a show with a storyline or something like that. But as I said before, if I'm going to sit down and watch like a binge watch series, I probably enjoy what's on HBO a lot more than I enjoy what's on Netflix. Like the Lakers thing that's on HBO right now, I really like that. I think they've done a really good job with that. The one that kind of goes back and looks at the start of the Showtime era for the Lakers. I've actually really, really well enjoyed that. All right. Good stuff. Thanks all for being here today. So I will see you from Port Canaveral on Monday. Excited about that. And I will see some of you on the ship there coming up on Monday afternoon there too. Really exciting stuff. Also, make sure to check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online, ajc.com. Told you it's a very busy weekend for local sports. Braves back at home. Hawks trying to change the balance of their series against the Miami Heat. So a lot of action here locally on that. ajc.com to get you plenty of coverage. Also looking into the NFL draft. You can get that from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution there as well. And don't forget to check out R.S. Andrews online for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Water heater, if it goes out in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. Just make sure you find them online at rsandrews.com. Have a great weekend. We'll see you from Florida on Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to talking to you then.